Hi everyone, my name is Morgan Lavelli. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about reading comprehension and how to teach it. So reading is essential. It has long been what's propelled societies into Renaissance movements and revolutions, and it is so necessary because without it we can't exist as a society. We can't propel ourselves forward. We can't do anything. We're stuck where we are. We're stagnant. Without reading and writing, there is no movement. There is no future. And it's such a key skill, but for some reason, time and time again, as teachers, we get students, especially in our high school classrooms, who can't read. The system has failed them as it just passed them. So No Child Left Behind, standardized testing, all of these things that have been designed to keep students from falling through the cracks have just kind of made the crack bigger. And I just want to take a moment and talk about the fact that reading is not one size fits all. It's never going to be. Every single child that we get in our classrooms is absolutely unique. Their brains function differently, they learn differently, they express creativity differently. So some children's brains grasp comprehension more easily. And while it might just be like, oh, that's just not a gift and talent you get. No, reading is a gift and talent that everybody gets to have. That is not some big mystery. It's reading. People have been doing it for thousands of years. So as teachers, when we get these students in the high school level who still cannot read, what do we do? Because in each content area, there's no longer a place for reading instruction unless these students are in a reading class. It can feel really, really hopeless, but it doesn't have to be. There's extensive research in the education world which can equip students where they are with what they need. And there is just all it takes is an awareness of resources, teamwork, and dedication to the success of your students, which as teachers we all want. So the first thing that we need to do as teachers is make sure we have an actual in-depth understanding of a child's brain. So the different biological and environmental effects that can occur in a child's brain can absolutely affect whether or not they learn how to read and comprehend what they're reading more easily, or if it's going to take a lot more practice to get there. I've kind of been able to summarize what you need to know about the brain's role in reading comprehension to be successful in teaching your students how to read, and unsurprisingly, reading involves the entire brain, the whole thing, especially the entire cerebrum. So that's like the main part of your brain, the big bubbly part that everyone thinks of. That's your cerebrum, and reading takes every single part of it. So the different lobes, your occipital lobe, your parietal lobe, your frontal lobe, etc., reading involves all of those. And that's because reading requires a combination of brain functions. It requires vision, memory, reason, judgment. All of these things are critical when it comes to reading. And children's brains should all follow the same growth pattern, but we know that they don't. And it can be a variety of things, such as drug use or alcohol consumption while the mother was pregnant with the baby, or having already come out of the womb. Drug use, alcohol consumption, all of these things can affect the brain just as much, if not more so, than biological effects, such as learning disabilities, dyslexia, autism, ADHD. All of these things can affect how easily a child obtains the ability to learn how to comprehend what they're reading. It doesn't mean they're never going to be able to, though. It just means that we might have to take a different route to get them there because their brain's just not the same as everyone else's, and that's totally okay. It just depends on the child. So brain function is very, very key, and we have to understand that not every child is coming in to our classrooms with this picture-perfect brain. And it's our jobs to adjust. It's our job to adjust to teaching them because it's not their fault and it's not their responsibility to teach themselves. It's our responsibility to teach them. In addition, post-birth home life. If they come from a poor, like a literature deficient home, there's a poor amount of literature available to them, then it can further impact a child's brain development because they're not exposed to as much literature, so it's not as practiced of a skill. And so there's just a deficiency there when it comes to vocabulary, when it comes to sentence recognition, when it comes to just general practice with reading. They just haven't been exposed to it as much or as in depth as students who come from a home where they were read to. So finally, reading comprehension can be broken down into this formula of reading comprehension equals decoding times linguistic comprehension. So if you break down those words, decoding is looking at a word. So it's taking and picking apart the different parts of a word to create meaning. And then linguistic comprehension, linguistics. So that language, those skills of understanding the sounds and the words that would go together to create those sounds and those words as a whole. And decoding times linguistic comprehension equals reading comprehension. So you have to have all of those things together. And then finally, they have to have cognitive flexibility. So cognitive flexibility means the ability to shift from one task to another. So they have to be able to go back and forth in their brain as they're reading to connect what they're reading to what they already know. Background knowledge and memory, again, going back to that whole brain function, all of it has to work together so that they can understand what they're reading. The next thing we have to understand after we grasp the role of the brain is how to use that information properly to educate our students. So good readers are three things. They are metacognitive, they are strategic, and they are motivated. So we talked about the metacognitive part already when we talk about the brain. As Willingham and Lovett present in their research article, Can Reading Comprehension Be Taught? Reading comprehension strategy instruction often yields little result. So just directly being like, hey, here's what you should do while you read, it's not really going to work. So instead, teaching comprehension should come from a place of personal connection with a text. So meaning you as the teacher, but also as a human being and a reader, what is your connection with the text? If you don't have a connection with the text, why are you asking your students to have one? Only once you determine how meaning is applied to you can you begin to teach others how to do so as well. So you need to take a critical look at what you do when you read, and then you need to be blatantly honest with your students, and you need to demonstrate that. And everybody reads differently, so every teacher needs to do this, because I might be teaching 160 students, and while 80% of them agree with me and we use the same techniques, that other 20% don't, but maybe their science teacher teaches it the same way and they read the same way as their science teacher, and so that's who they plug in with, and they use those strategies in my class to succeed, and it doesn't matter. So as I'm reading, I use a lot of fiction. I prefer fiction, and it's not just this aesthetic experience, and it's not just entertainment. Fiction exercises your imagination and your critical thinking, because you're able to read about a world that maybe doesn't even exist, yet you've got these mental pictures of things that are vividly flashing, and your brain is just firing on all levels, creating this world that shouldn't exist. It's just plain text on white paper, but for whatever reason, it's creating this vivid picture in your mind. And that's what reading is, and that's what reading should be. But we have to teach students to do that. Not everyone does that naturally. So what does that look like? That looks like choosing a book that I love, choosing something that I have this personal connection and interest with, and reading it with my students and showing them that interest and encouraging them to also have that interest. So students can see how to do this when reading text, and one of the authors in the book Mosaic of Thought, which is a beautifully crafted book about the complexities of comprehension, described her emotions as she read through an excerpt of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. She was frustrated by the oppressiveness of young Angelou and her lack of self-esteem as a result of racist America. And as I was reading this author's recount of her expression and her experience through this book, it made me want to read the book. I've read pieces of this book, but I've never read the whole thing. But after reading the author's experience, I wanted to read it. And now not only am I reading it, but my students are reading it because they need to have this experience with this text as well. And so that's how powerful it can be when you are just honest with what you think and what you feel as you read. And that goes with any subject area. So history, if you get all fired up when you're reading about ancient Egypt and you just think it's so cool and you found this poster about something, show them your passion. Show them how your own experiences and your own beliefs surround what you love to do and what you love to read. The last big part of reading comprehension is to encourage our students to be inquisitive learners. So to be an inquisitive learner means to ask questions. And I don't know about you, but personally, my students have never had a problem asking questions. Sometimes I think they ask too many questions, but that's fine. We have to encourage them to do this, though, even if it gets a little bit tedious at times, because asking questions is when learning happens. And it's not just asking questions in class. You have to ask questions to the author. So one of our standards in high school, especially in English class, is what is the author's purpose? Well, okay, you could say to entertain or to inform, or that's not the question anymore. That's like a first grade level. What is the author's purpose? What does the author really want to teach you? So sticking with the caged bird example, did Maya Angelou only write this book to document her struggles? Technically, it was to inform. That is the author's purpose. But she wrote it not to just inform, but to call out the injustices of the world and to invoke emotions of pain, heartbreak, hatred, and discrimination, but then also perseverance, strength, and dignity through those things. Why did she want her readers to feel this? To answer these questions, students have to be able to apply this background knowledge to the text. They have to have opinions formed. They have to have had a rich environment where they've experienced different forms of media talking about racism in America today, and talking about the treatment of African Americans and minorities, and what are their opinions on that, and what are their experiences with it? Have they experienced this themselves? How can they apply this to what Angelou is saying? Has there been growth in our country? Has there not been growth? If there has been growth, what can we keep doing? What are we doing wrong? It's supposed to stir things up. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable. And that's why she wrote it. And that's what she wants her readers to get out of it. But my students aren't going to get that if they don't ask questions. And if they don't dig deeper. And they don't find some sort of greater interest in the texts. And to do this, there's no better way to do this than through conversation and talking about a book. So many of my students in class have expressed that just talking about ideas and topics in class using Socratic seminar or small group discussion. I don't really do class debates because I don't find those as fruitful as other forms of discussion, but in your class it might work. Just talking to each other and working these ideas out in a natural way, because that's how the world works. We talk. And my students have expressed that just talking about these ideas and topics in class have helped them think and discover more deeply than silently working and never collaborating. I know teaching reading comprehension is a daunting task that often feels impossible, but it's a skill with immeasurable value. And it's our job to make sure our kids can do it. By making sure our kids are using and exercising parts of their brain that they need, along with helping them be motivated and strategic, we can, in unison, teach them comprehension of word and world. We are their teachers, and this job is possible if we unite our knowledge and skills at hand to do so.